We go live now to Cambridge in the United States to speak with arms control expert Paul Walker. He's participated in the first on-site inspection of Russian chemical weapons by US officials and works closely with the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Thanks so much for joining us, Paul. I want to start by asking you, the UK, the US and France all believe that they have proof not only that this chemical weapons attack happened, but also that the Syrian regime was behind it. So what will the OPCW's fact-finding mission actually involve, and how much can it really accomplish?
You know, Kim, good to be with you this evening. The OPCW fact-finding mission was founded in May of 2014. So it's been ongoing for 4 years, directed towards investigating alleged chemical weapons attacks in Syria. It's investigated at least a dozen attacks to date, and this latest one, of course, in Duma, is really no different in many ways than the others. The challenge in Syria is it's the first time that OPCW inspectors have been asked to really visit sites which are in the middle of war zones and risk potential violence. It's the first time actually inspectors have worn bulletproof vests, and it's the first time inspectors have been fired on. The very first inspection back in 2014, they were fired on, and the driver of one of the vehicles was almost killed. So it's an on-site inspection, just as I did, or somewhat similar to back in Russia in 1994. We've met with the inspectors over the last years and talked to them about these inspections. They're anxious to get on-site samples, soil samples, any liquid or air samples they can. But of course, this is a week after the alleged attack in Duma. And they're also anxious to interview all witnesses, any and all victims, all medical personnel, and to try to evaluate any remnants of any weapons that might have been used to fire the chemical agents. So I think a lot can be gained. There have been over a dozen reports in the last 4 years from the fact-finding missions, and they've been extremely helpful in identifying, I think it's 4 or 5 cases of use of chemical weapons by, potentially by Syria. But of course, their role is not to attribute who's done it. That role was to something called the Joint Investigative Mechanism, what we call the JIM, the JIM, which has to be approved by the UN Security Council. And as you know, the last extension request for the JIM, which was in November, 5 months ago, was vetoed by Russia.
I want to come back to that issue of blame in a second, but you talked there about taking soil samples and the like, and as you mentioned, it's been a week since that attack. Alleged attack, what does that do to the ability to gather evidence?
You know, the sooner you can get to a site, the better. I mean, if you can be there within minutes after the strike, of course, assuming in a gas attack, in a chemical weapons attack like this, that it's not still dangerous from a chemical agent perspective, is much better than 7 or 10 or 20 days later.
Will there be anything left in the soil?
There could be. There very likely will be. If it's chlorine, perhaps not, because chlorine is very volatile. You know, frankly, it just evaporates very quickly. If it's any sort of a nerve agent, and the only nerve agent they found to date at bomb sites like this would be sarin nerve agent, that tends to last quite a while. It's persistent, as we say. And so no matter how hard you try to clean it up, and the site could have already been cleaned up, you know, by government forces or others, we don't know. But no matter how hard you try, there's probably some samples you can get. So I would assume they'll find some samples, but if it's only chlorine that was used, and there's some question in this attack whether it was chlorine or chlorine and sarin, if it's only chlorine, probably the only samples they'll be able to get will be medical samples from urine and blood tests and medical samples wherever the clinics were and the hospitals were that the victims are treated at. Just
finally, Paul, I want to ask you, as you mentioned, the OPCW has been operating Syria for some time. After the Ghouta attack, in which hundreds of people were killed, After that, the US threatened airstrikes and then struck a deal and said, OK, Russia, make sure that Syria has got rid of all of its chemical weapons and we'll call it a day. The OPCW and the UN, the joint mission head at that time, said that Syria had destroyed more than 96% of all of its chemical weapons. Now we see there are more chemical attacks. Does that mean that the OPCW or the UN were incorrect, or is that enough time for Syria to have disbanded its chemical weapons and then rebuild?
Well, when Ghouta happened in August of 2013, there were about 1,400 people who were killed. That was a massive attack with with the sarin nerve agent. And of course, there's been no attribution for that attack. I mean, I think many of us believe, I certainly personally believe, that was a Syrian government attack, but we don't know. And the fact-finding mission, when it was established, was set up not to examine Ghouta. The political compromise that was made by the OPCW and the United Nations was that it would go forward without examining Ghouta. So it's examined several other cases, as I say, about a dozen or more, I think, over the last 4 years. I think the reports so far in Duma was that a chemical was definitely used, and that I think there'll be positive results from the fact-finding mission. The demilitarization program that went forward in 2013 removed 1,308 metric tons from Syria. It was decided uniquely for the first time that the chemicals couldn't be destroyed in a safe way in Syria because of the war, and so it was all removed. About 20 tons of isopropyl alcohol were destroyed in Syria, and everything else was removed. Half of it destroyed on board the Cape Ray, this merchant marine ship. The process was neutralization, a wet chemistry process in the Mediterranean, and the other half was burned in Britain, Finland, Germany, and the United States. And at the time, the OPCW really felt they had to believe the Syrians. It's up to the state party, the country, to declare everything it has.